Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the board meeting of the Care Quality Commission. This is the first of the new times of doing these in the afternoon. I hope it's convenient for everybody. I just wanted to make sure, probably useful to explain where everybody is. We are here in Redmond Place, and the majority of the board is here. One member was unable to get here because of problems with the trains yesterday. And we've also, a number of our presenters are actually dialing in online, which seemed the only sensible response to the difficulties of travel yesterday. But I think in the circumstances, we've got a remarkably good turnout here, including a very long bus ride by one of our members to make it. So congratulations to them. We're also joined by Karen Hill, who you may see on the screen. Karen is our Equality Network representative from the Disability Equality Network, so welcome, Karen. One or two apologies. Robert Francis, one of the board members, is unable to join us today, so apologies from him. But also Chris Usher and Chris Day from the executive team, who often join us, are not able to do so today. And lastly, in terms of faces, I should welcome Sean, Sean, thank you. I can't even find you. Sean, of course, joined the organisation a little while ago, but this is his first public board meeting since he joined the board. So, Sean, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's move on to the formal business and the presentations. Are there any conflicts of interest or new conflicts of interest to note? I don't see anybody. I had no urgent business to pick up. At one point I would flag, which is not urgent, but is to say that we are, in due course, as is public, going to be losing a couple of our non-executives. They will be here for the next meeting, so this isn't urgent. We are in the process of working with the department, and I have mentioned this publicly before, to find successors. Really appreciate at the moment, but that can be a challenge. But we'll keep you updated in due course as things progress. I think, having said that, then let's move on to the formal business of the meeting. And the first item is the equality objectives, which we are to consider and approve. Lucy Wilkinson and Jill Nicholson, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Ian. It's Lucy Wilkinson here. I'm Head of Equality, Health Inequalities and Human Rights. And just a few introductory remarks. The first being that the equality objectives were published in July 2021, just 2 months after we published our new strategy, and published following board approval. So they're very closely aligned to our strategy. We have 4 regulatory equality objectives, which relate closely to our strategy theme about reducing inequalities in access, experience and outcomes for people using health and social care services, and 1 equality objective relating to equality, diversity and inclusion for CQC staff. And I'm joined by Jill Nicholson, who's the Director of People, to address any questions relating to that objective. The first year has been very much a kind of a foundational year where we've focused on ensuring that the equality objectives are reflected in CQC's priorities in various kind of important pieces of work, like our data strategy, our independent voice strategy, our research priorities and so on, and also the opportunities that we've had in embedding tackling inequalities in our new regulatory model for both providers and local systems. We've also been doing quite a lot of work engaging internally, including with leaders and with other staff, and externally, including looking at opportunities for cross arm's length body working on advancing equality through the topics in our equality objectives. And then finally, we've been trying to accelerate some specific pieces of work which are covered in the paper, and I won't go into in detail. A couple of minor amendments to make, in that we were working on the appendix right up to the last minute, and I did notice that we haven't quite got the overall distributions right in the main paper about the deliverables and the success measures, so I need to correct those for the record. So on the deliverables, 22 are on green, 6 are on amber, none are on red, and 6 have not started yet. And they're just deliverables for this financial year, though the equality objectives do cover a 4-year period. The success measures are more long-term. There are some challenges in measuring them yet, particularly the ones where we need to build up our capacity to disaggregate data that we gather, for example, in surveys and so on, by equality characteristics. And the distribution of them is that 12 out of 29 are not yet measurable because they're too early to be able to do that. And then 9 are green, 7 are amber, and 2 are red. It's quite challenging to design success measures for equality objectives. I know that that's been an issue raised by both the board and the executive team before, and we're working on that, particularly linking with the strategy assurance work. It's maybe easier to do the success measures on the internal CQC workforce equality objective because we have like a whole data set about our own staff, but it's harder in relation to, for example, people who use services. Just a final point is that the board reporting doesn't yet align really with how we plan the priorities, because we're on an annual work planning cycle along with the rest of CQC because it's embedded in CQC work, which is kind of April to March. But because we publish the equality objectives in July, you're getting kind of quarter of the way to, 4 months through the year, a view of how we're doing. So the proposal is that the next report would come in February, where you could have a full year review and also some input into what that means about next year's delivery. That's all I wanted to say at the start.
Sorry, thank you very much. I ask colleagues of questions for Lucy. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Lucy, for a very, very good report. Really excellent to see the work on executive engagement in this area, the oversight and rigour of the oversight of our progress, and some changes in our processes as well. Also really good to see collaboration with other ALBs and our own work in terms of the independent panel members and the appointment of our diversity and inclusion coordinators, and very good to see the work around inclusive leadership pathway. So this is all great. As you've said, there still needs to be some work done on measures, and obviously still some work to be done in terms of training of our staff in measuring data and how we influence providers through our well-led framework. Did have a couple of questions, Lucy, if I could. One, why the second iteration of the reverse mentoring program is not green. It's amber. It seems to me we could be ready to go on that straight away. And I did wonder, in terms of selection processes, you've demonstrated there that we're going to be looking to make sure that our advertisements and our processes are not exclusive, are inclusive. But I just wondered whether you as a team have looked at the use of AI in selection, and whether we are, if we are using AI at all in our selection, whether we're ensuring there's no exclusivity there. And then finally,
I'm sorry.
And then, sorry, it's a long question, I know.
That's okay. Keep going.
And I just want to say, in terms of the shortlisting bias for promotions and acting ups, we have asked for that information to come to the public board, and I'm very hopeful that that comes, and that's something that gets a lot of visibility at the board. But thank you very much indeed for the report.
I'll ask Jill to answer those because the People Directorate lead on the detail of the delivery of the Equality Objective 5, so I'll pass over to Jill.
Thanks, Mark. Really helpful reflections and questions. So I'll take them in the order in which you made them. So the reverse mentoring, I think probably it was Amber at the time that we pulled this paper together. We had a people committee meeting shortly after that we concluded and finalised this paper, which confirmed our the approval to go live with the next cohort of this really important initiative. As you will know, all of the board, for those of you who were actively involved yourself within our first cohort of reverse mentoring, it was a very powerful thing for all concerned, and we took some good time to make a proper evaluation of the activity so that we could be really clear that we were building on strong foundations for how we roll this out further. Obviously, the paper indicates that we're expanding this out to colleagues with a disability, as well as those from an ethnic minority background or black or Asian background. So we are we wanted to make sure that we were really ready to roll this out well. We, as I said, agreed this at the People Committee earlier this month, and so our plans will be in place to roll this out sort of in the autumn time, so that we can actually properly manage that with colleagues across the organisation. So that was that one. On the selection processes, I think it's a really good reflection. I can take that away to the team. We are looking at a whole raft of activity under our QI project, so there's no reason why we cannot build in AI into that sort of in terms of a sort of a scoping and a review point. So happy to take that away. And then the shortlisting bias information, I think we can probably bring that. As I'll share later in the people plan session, planning to come to board on a twice yearly basis. They're more than happy to bring that at our next opportunity to board. So always happy to share that.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Jill. Mark, other questions? Jora, go next, and then I think Sally coming on the screen.
Thanks, Ian. And just on Mark's second point, I noticed in the board pack that the technical data issues or technical data risks were highlighted. I wasn't quite sure. Is that we're not collecting quality data, or is it more of a technical issue? Or could you expand what was meant by technical data risks?
Yeah, I can take that one. This is largely relating to regulatory data, not our HR data. So this relates to issues, particularly with qualitative data, about how we can disaggregate that by equality characteristics. So, for example, information that comes into us from give feedback on care from members of the public and people who use services, where we might not be aware of their equality characteristics, or the way that things are phrased might not be easy to work out whether or not there's an equality dimension to the issues that they're raising with us. So there's some things about how we use and score qualitative data. There are other issues that the most of the data that we collect, that we use in data sets around quality of care, so that's equality data around patients and people who use services, we don't collect directly, and is collected by other bodies such as NHSEI, NHS Digital, individual trusts, and there's even less in GPs and in adult social care than there are in the larger services. So that is one of the areas that came out very strongly in terms of joint work with arm's length bodies about aligning and strengthening data collection on equality, so we can look at the quality of care for different groups of people. Obviously, the primary responsibility for that is on the care provider. So the other thing that we're doing is writing into our single assessment framework quality statements around how they are looking at the quality of care that they provide in terms of equity in access, experience and outcomes. So we are not expecting to do all the data analysis across the whole of health and social care to uncover equality issues, but we do come across difficulty when we're trying to use data sets by others that are not yet good enough on equality.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're sort of levelling up the sort of equality of everybody sort of having the same quality of care, but we're not collecting the data. I'm sort of like, what's the mitigation? I wasn't quite clear on, are we saying that it's up to the providers to improve the quality of data they collect, or are we sort of holding them to account to improve the data that they're collecting, so we can assess that individuals who may have a disability aren't being penalised for having a disability?
Well, we're doing two things really. The first is that we're working nationally to improve data collection, and you've picked a very good example there, Jura, because there isn't yet, for example, in the NHS accessible information standard doesn't yet have good data collection, and one of the things that we've been asking as part of the accessible information standard review is about whether or not metrics can be improved at a national level, so that there is a framework for providers to actually collect and, more importantly, analyse and use that data. The second thing is, where data is already collected, that we look at the quality of the data as part of our assessment of quality. And we've done a piece of work specifically looking at ethnicity data in mental health, because there is the ability to collect ethnicity data in mental health data sets. And so we're actually using the quality of that data, looking at using that as a measure, because it's comparable across all the organisations that are expected to use the mental health standard data set. So where it's a provider failing to collect or to use, then we will build it in there, and where it's providers maybe would like to, but there isn't the national framework to do that, then we're trying to work with others to develop that.
Thank you.
Sally, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian, and thanks to Lucy and Jill. I had a specific question on 5.4, which is around diversity data as well, and then a more general point about section 3, working with others. So on 5.4, it's rated green, but we have a target of 95% of data collected, and all of those figures are below 95. So whilst I appreciate it's a positive trend, I think we need to decide whether it really is green, what more we could do. And under section 3, around working with others, a lot of the measures are about us asking providers or stakeholders how they think we are doing. And I wonder, going back to the GP's report that Rosie might want to comment on last time around perceptions of equality in our own regulation, and the need for us to work with other bodies like NHS England on some of the issues there. Although this is year 1, perhaps over year 2, I'd like to think about not just asking providers for their comments, but to think more proactively and strategically about how we work with other bodies in health to be able to push this agenda forward and make a real difference for people who use services. Thank you.
Shall I just comment on the GP aspect? Because for board members who may not have seen this, we did a large piece of work looking at inequalities faced by GPs of black and minority ethnic background and the potential inequalities that they faced, and the impact of our regulation. And some of the findings very much highlighted the need for good data collection that actually none of the system had really in terms of that quality of data. And I think it's really important that we work and we continue to work with other parts of the system so that when we're looking at data collection, we're not all going into providers collecting data in lots of different ways, but we're doing that in a sensible way that doesn't kind of create impact, but enables to understand the issues. But also, I think it's really important. One of the things that was flagged in that report is that we found that there was a lot of practices led by GPs from black and minority ethnic background who who were working in environments where they were just not getting the support that they needed in very deprived areas and areas with less funding and a whole range of other issues. And so it is vital, and I completely agree with Sally, it's going to be vital for us to work with other partners, and we're doing that, to look at actually how do we make sure that people get the support, get the resource that they need to be able to give good quality care and thrive. And I think integrated care systems, as we go forward, have a really vital role in looking at the inequalities that exist potentially across their areas and being able to address them. So I think part of our ICS regulation needs to be looking at actually how are integrated care systems understanding that and putting plans in place to be able to address those inequalities and making sure that people get the support they need to be able to deliver good care.
Thanks, thanks, Rosie. A really important point about the role of ICSs. But Lucy, there are other questions. Do you respond to Sally?
Yes, so I think Jill will need to pick up the one on 5.4. So just to say that it's a really good challenge over the measures for 3. We can go away and look at them. So there is the activity, the kind of activity report at the front of it gives a bit more detail on what we're doing. Getting good measures for how the impact of what we're doing, I think we need to develop over time, and I think that's a really good thing that I can take away.
And I think on 5.4, so we've probably been perhaps optimistic in our, or a bit sort of positive in our rounding up and looking on balance that whether or not we felt that that all of the indicators were sufficiently robust that we could give ourselves a green score on that. I think, you know, we've got sort of, in terms of rounding, we are, if we round it up, when then our disability declaration rates are on target, we're not that far off with the ethnicity declaration rates, slightly lower than we would want to be perhaps on the sexual orientation and religion. But if people feel strongly at the board that this should be amber rather than green, then we can happily change that.
I don't think you need to retroactively change this report, nor I'm not suggesting either a new category of almost green, but I think as a general rule for future reporting, we just, as Sally said, you ought to be clear, we either do or we don't achieve it, or we find a slightly different way of measuring it, not an almost green, but something that flags what's going on. I mean, an indicator or direction of travel once we are into a second period would also be quite helpful, because often that's as interesting as the level status. Any other questions for Lucy or Jill? Just one final one from me then, Lucy, and this is probably an unfair question in a public meeting, but I'll ask you anyway. I mean, this is us, and clearly we're interested in what we're doing, but you have talked about working with other ALBs as well. So I'm not asking you to comment on others. This is a report about us. But do you have any observations from working with others as to where we, well, two questions actually. One is kind of where we stand, anything to learn from others where we are more successful or perhaps less successful than others, and why that might be. And then the second question is, to what extent are these things all within our control, or are some of these to some extent influenced by what's going on in the wider system, and therefore we don't have complete control over it?
Really good question, thank you. So in terms of where we're at, I think one of the things we've got is we've got a new I'm going to fudge this slightly. We've got a new research budget, and we've in CQC, and one of the themes on that is about tackling inequalities. And one of the things that, as the sponsor for that part of the research budget, I want to do is an actual kind of assessment of what we can learn from other regulators in other sectors and also in other countries about how they have, not what they're doing, but how they have actually made an impact on tackling inequalities. I think, generally speaking, we've got a level of clarity and a level of commitment and a level of kind of development of the programme that is quite strong compared to many other organisations. I wouldn't like to say where we would rank compared to other organisations, but I think we've got high ambitions, so we want key to our core purpose, because we're here to regulate that care quality is good, and that's care quality is good for the people that are more likely to have poor care is really, really important. So we need to keep on with it. We've got a good foundations in place. We need to kind of not rest on our laurels, I would say. So what's in control? The activity is definitely in control. There are sometimes confounding factors in the success measures, is what I would say, which we need to be aware of. So everything that's in the deliverables is within our control, but the success measures might have confounding factors.
Rosie?
Can I just add that? And I just want to say well done to Lucy, because I know Lucy's built very, very constructive relationships with arm's length bodies across the system, and those relationships are really growing and really productive, and we're working particularly with people like Bola Olawabi from NHS England, the Director of Inequalities. So I think we're positioned well to progress this and to play our part across the system, and I think Lucy's brought this agenda forward massively in the last year or two. What I would say is I think all of us as arm's length, all the arm's length bodies have so much more to do in this area. I think we're only being really starting to understand some of the inequalities that exist, and if you look at the work we've done around general practice, if you look at the work around maternity and outcomes for black and minority ethnic women, if you look at some of the DNA CPR work we did last year and the impact on people with learning disabilities, for example, there are huge inequalities that exist, and I think all of us as arm's length bodies need to be challenging ourselves to do more and do it quicker, really.
Thanks, Rosie, and thanks, Lucy, as well. I was pleased to hear you'll be looking at what others do. I mean, it's important to retain the focus here, but equally, nobody has all the wisdom, so seeing what we can learn from others, including international, which I thought was interesting. Well done. If there are no other questions, I don't seem to be looking around the table. So, Lucy, thank you very much indeed. Good report, both in terms of its comprehensibility and its content. So we look forward to meeting you again and having at least equally as good reports from you. Thanks.
Thank you. See you in February then.
Yes. If we move on, we now have the people plan. So, Jill, I think you're remaining with us, and this one's down for you.
Yep, it certainly is. Okay, so I've shared with you our sort of draft people plan, just by way of context as to why this is with you. We've reviewed and refreshed our existing people plan, which was launched in March 2020, running for 3 years, but we felt it was probably time to actually give it a bit of a refresh at this stage before we reach the end of the 3-year period. And the reason why we wanted to do that was to reflect what we had achieved so far, but then also where we needed to focus in the future to support our transformation journey. So really tying our people plan into the transformation journey. And you'll see from the draft plan that I have tabled for you that our overall ambition is to create a great employee experience for all of our colleagues every day. And I do recognise that the organisational changes that are underway can be unsettling and can have an impact on how people feel and experience working with us. So we need both to be mindful of the here and now, but also still striving for our ambition for the future. We also know from previous surveys that we need to really continue our focus on how our colleagues understand and experience change. So our leaders at all levels are critical to this point. The people plan that I've provided for you provides a focus on our core people activities and the key touch points for our colleagues, which all contribute to create a great employee experience. And you'll see from the plan that the role of the line managers is critical in all of these touch points, right the way through from attraction and onboarding to how people feel developed, how performance is managed, how people feel and our colleagues feel connected to the organisation so that they feel engaged and motivated. So line management activity really critical to all of those key touch points in the employee journey and life cycle. There are also within the plan 3 specific areas for focus. One is the diversity and inclusion agenda. So we have achieved a huge amount since we launched our D&I strategy in June 2020, but there is still more to do, and we have some work underway now to review the achievements to date and really focus on where we need to sort of add our focus and value going forward and our activity. The second area for focus is people's experience and insight. So I really, given that all of our strategy across the organisation is about being a data-driven and insight-driven organisation, we really need to continue in our people agenda to look at how we use people data effectively to inform our priorities and our actions. So really getting to the heart of how people experience working with us, but also what insights people can share with us in various different mechanisms for doing so. And then finally, leadership and change. I said this just now. It's really important that we embed leadership skills at all levels now and for the future for the organisation. So this is a high-level delivery plan attached to the overarching plan. It's supported by very detailed project plans, which obviously are sort of a detail that I wouldn't share necessarily with the board. But we are reporting on that progress to the People Committee on a quarterly basis, and we will bring a summary of our progress to board on a twice-yearly basis. So the People Plan finally has been approved by People Committee and also by the executive team. So I'm bringing it here to board ahead of sharing it with the wider organisation in this sort of period of August into early September. So I will pause there as a sort of summary of what I've brought to you, and happy to take any comments or questions.
Okay, many thanks, Jill. Stephen, you're up first.
Jill, thank you so much. I think this is a really, really terrific report. You've clearly made a huge amount of progress and thought really hard about what you need to do next. Could I pick up the comment you made, because I strongly agree with it, about the importance of line management? You're absolutely right how important it is. Could I sort of push you a little to give your assessment of how good it is currently? How would you rate the current sort of quality, confidence of managers? Yeah. We're setting them a huge task of change management and culture change management. It's a lot we're expecting of our managers. How do you rate current capability? Could I then ask a second question? Yeah. I couldn't see anything in the report about the consequences of 2 years of working from home on what you want future working practices to be. It may not be true here in many organisations. I mean, I think people are now wrestling with what is a future, more sort of hybrid, more agile way of balancing individuals working from home, from the office, from third places. Is that an issue for you in terms of people management? Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. So I'll take those in the order in which you've shared them. So a good challenge for me. How do I rate our line managers? If we look to our survey data, I think our colleagues have a very strong connection with their line manager, and they rate them really highly. And I think that is relatively unusual certainly in the organisations in which I've worked previously. I think we have pockets of really excellent line management practice, as you'd expect in an organisation. I think we have some colleagues who in line management roles who perhaps do lack a little confidence, and so I would say it was probably patchy. We have some really, really brilliant line managers, and we have some people for whom actually some of the interventions that we have available in terms of our line management learning offering has been really helpful for them. And we have now got quite an established cohort of internal coaches who can offer specific coaching to line managers. So it's a work in progress. I think we've got some great people. What I really want to do is make sure we're role modelling the really great people management skills that we see in people and our colleagues experience, as well as making sure that we've got the tools available for all of our colleagues who've got a line management responsibility to be able to feel confident to work in that way. And much of that is to do with how they are coached and supported by their line managers up the chain. So, you know, right from the very top, all of us as line managers need to be really demonstrating great line management skills, and that includes, you know, giving constructive feedback when it's required. So I think, without wanting to put a sort of a marker on it, Stephen, that's kind of my summary of what I think what I see and experience. And I think then on your second point, I think unlike their other organisations, we entered into the pandemic with 67% of our workforce already home workers. So we already had this as an established way of working. I think we've proved over the last 2 years that we can actually function really well as an organisation with a high degree of home working in our midst. And so our technology platforms support that entirely. Our ways of working, our colleagues are, you know, used to travelling to connect with their colleagues. I think we've made great, there's been a huge amount of activity going on, which is probably completely unreported at board, around the sorts of social interventions that people have initiated within their teams. You know, bringing children in, Christmas carols, story time for those when a great number of our colleagues were homeschooling, had their children homeschooling. So some really brilliant initiatives, and I think that actually it's not an issue for us. I think we can manage well where we are. We currently have 91% of the organisation now on a home-based contract. That feels comfortable. It's not diminished our ability to deliver our and performance, and so we are open to considering home-based contracts on an ongoing basis. I think it's certainly something which I think we have proved that we can do well.
And can I just add to Jill's comments? I think I'd actually really turn that around and say, actually, we're turning that into a positive in some areas. In some teams, you know, we're able to recruit hard to recruit skills because we can offer that flexibility, and because as Jill described, you know, it was not a cultural shock to move to home working. We already had a national footprint. We had a significant number of people in the field force, and a significant number of people working from home anyway. So I think what we've managed to do is to build on that. And as Jill described, we've made some investments in technology platforms as well, which again put us in good stead. So I think that combination of culture, national footprint, and technology meant we were well placed, and we are now attracting some really talented individuals who maybe we wouldn't otherwise have got. So I think it's a real positive, actually.
Any other questions for Jill? Jura?
Just a quick one, Jill. On the delivery plan, on slide 48 of our pack, it talks about sort of increasing, you know, maybe having more diverse individuals as part of the executive team and decreasing other. Would it be worth, or would you feel comfortable putting a range in, like increase by a percentage of X? Because how do you measure success? Because it seems a bit vague.
So I think the success measure is actually in the diversity and inclusion strategy, which is where these all fit together. So our ambition and our target is to effectively map against the economically active population for both ethnicity and disability. So overall, I think for ethnicity it's currently 14%, and we're overall I think at 14.1%. But when you look at that on a grade spread, so we're not quite there. So that's our target, is to continually meet that, so that we are representative of the economically active population that we serve. We're not quite there with disability, but that certainly is there. But we can, it's there in another part of the sort of interconnected strategy. So the D&I strategy has that very, very clear.
Mark, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks, Jill, for a very good report. I certainly want to endorse the good progress that you've made so far in terms of recognition, leadership development, independent panel members, and the diversity, inclusion, and well-being focus and actions. So, I really do applaud you for that. I'm going to say I'm going to miss your old people plan diagram. I quite like the old 6 pillars, so I'm going to get used to your new diagram. But in terms of the actual attachment to the plan, I wonder whether actually on page 54 of our pack, the employee experiences and insight, a move to peer-to-peer recognition. I wonder if that is actually an example of a post-pandemic people action as people became very much influenced by social media in that time. So that's one question, if I could. And then on page 55 of our pack, the employee experiences and insight and building engagement approach, establishing our regular survey rhythm, and the expected outcome is to be confirmed in this pack. And I would have thought we already have some measures that we would want to use in terms of evaluating our performance in that area. And I mean sort of areas such as that we survey in terms of people recommending CQC as a place to work, people feeling that CQC has a concern for their well-being. We have some measures, so I was a bit surprised to see that not having any measures confirmed at the moment. And I think I draw your attention again to the one below that about developing and producing informative and relevant people data packs. Again, the expected outcome is to be confirmed, but I would have thought that the outcome there is sort of improved resourcing effectiveness and improved shaping of our workforce. And I just ask you why those outcomes have not yet been determined.
Thanks, Mark. So some really good questions. I think where we've got the to be confirmed, certainly in the context of the sort of people survey, is to do with the fact that we are just onboarding a new survey provider. So sort of I expect us to continue to ask the questions that we've broadly asked in previous years, so that we can maintain our trajectory and make our sort of important sort of trend analysis work on where we see things improving or dipping and where we need to pay particular attention. So the to be confirmed there in that context relates entirely to that. I think we are also just then on the back of that looking at really, because what we want to do is ensure constantly that we're providing colleagues in the business and leaders in the business with the right people data. That is a good opportunity for us to really reflect on the people data that we provide to our colleagues. So is what we have in our extensive people pack helpful? Does it contribute to the right conversations? And so is there a point at which we can refine that? But perhaps we can tighten that up. I'm happy to take that away. We can bring it back to board in February.
And Jill, the peer-to-peer
Sorry,
comment,
yes.
could you just talk to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, of course. So we know from our research that actually peer-to-peer recognition can be really powerful, and so we've never really had a mechanism for doing that before. And so this is an opportunity, and it's in train now. And we have a platform which allows peer-to-peer recognition and recognition up the line. It's not as sophisticated as we would like, and so it gives what we really want to do is provide a really easy route by way that colleagues can actually recognise their peers, say thank you for something, if that's to do with any of our values, you know, whether they've been the experience, had really great experience of team working in collaboration with a colleague, whether they've seen some really excellent inputs, or they, you know, have demonstrated integrity or caring. So really wanting to make sure that we've got a mechanism which is a bit less clunky than we currently have, which is essentially where we have to route everything through the line manager in order to trigger the sort of the recognition award. So the objective around that is to make sure that we're building on the ethos and culture of recognition in the broadest sense, and do so in a way where we've got a platform that supports that.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions from people? Jill, I had a couple which were sort of being touched on already, so I wouldn't ask you to repeat, but I may just try and tie them together. You talk about the the need for everyone to be leaders, the training of requirement of that, the tools, etc. I'd just be interested to get a better feel for the resource required to do that, and whether we actually have that in place already, or whether that's something that's got to be found in the more detailed plan that you referred to underneath. And then secondly, home working, as Ian, I think, said, and absolutely, you know, I've seen this myself in my time here, it does work successfully, and I think the organisation's is doing a good job of using what was almost a slight advantage to an even better competitive advantage to recruit people in. But home working, or at least collaboration by things like teams, works really well for people that know one another. It's much less effective if people don't know one another. And I just wonder how we're being able to induct people and bring in the people you've talked about, and then train and develop the people we're talking about, in an environment where 90% of the people aren't in the office in the first place.
Okay, so on the first point, yes, we do have the resources identified for all the learning, including all the learning that is related to our transformation activity. So I've got a very skilled bunch of learning professionals in the academy. We have identified the funding that we need for the various different programs that we are about to launch, including our Inclusive Leaders program, which I'm really proud of, and I am hoping is going to be really effective in the organisation. Our broader leadership program is resourced, and we'll be able to roll that out. So, and I think there's also, we mustn't underestimate the power of really strong role models in the organisation. So, as well as sort of investing in training and learning and opportunities for people to develop, I do think we also need to recognise that our leaders themselves are really powerful advocates for what good leadership looks like, and what good change leadership particularly looks like in the organisation. So I think a combination of training people, of some of our sort of strong advocates, of some of our really powerful role models, I think will get us to a point where we've got a kind of sweet spot in terms of our resourcing for that. And on the home working, we are now able to sort of bring people together. And so what I see and I hear from colleagues is a lot more of collaboration happening, because people are coalescing around a particular place. So more team-based activities are now happening as people are able to. We're out of sort of the restrictions that we had for the vast majority of the last 2 years. So that is starting to sort of manage itself again. And it's always been our way of working. So our teams have been really used to coming together for a purpose. And we are inducting in the way that we had previously. So we're looking to bring people together. Line managers, I know, are always really keen to meet people face to face as soon as they can. I know that from my own teams when we've brought new people in. The fact that that our organisation has caring as one of our values, I do believe that actually means that people are reaching out to colleagues. We see a lot of that through the regular communications, but there are certainly mechanisms in place, which means that we are able to establish relationships with people who are new when they join us.
Good, thanks. I mean, there's no doubt that the technology, the collaborative element of the technology has improved dramatically over the last couple of years, so I agree it's much easier than it was. Any other questions for Jill? If not, well, look, Jill, thanks very much indeed. I'm sure Mark will get over the fact that you've taken away the picture he liked, but...
I'll send him the picture so he can keep it for posterity.
I already have it, Jill.
Thanks very much indeed, Jill. We look forward to a future update. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I think next item up is a report from the executive team, so there'll be a number of contributors, but Ian, perhaps I can hand to you if there's anything you want to say, and then we'll hand it on to the others.
Thank you very much, Ian. So I think there are 4 items from Sean, Rosie and Tyson, which we will come off talk about in a second. Please take the report as written, and we will have an opportunity at the end of the meeting to formally thank Kirsty and Rosie for their contributions to the board as well. So if I could hand over to Sean in the first instance to talk about urgent and emergency care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Just to confirm to the board that the ambulance service remains under intense pressure with a number of key performance indicators, including call response times across all 4 categories of call, including 999 call answering times and including ambulance handover times have all either lengthened or increased over the last month. This may be partially due to increased demand. There's evidence of increased demand over the last month, but also due to the issues around preserving or improving patient flow through the emergency and urgent care pathway. So that's all I wanted to mention on that one.
Thanks, Sean. Why don't we perhaps take all of the reports and then come back to questions on any of them, if that's okay? It might be easier.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Just a couple of things from me. Firstly, I just want to take this opportunity, it's my last board, just to say a huge thank you to all of the CQC teams I've been working with in public. I have felt very privileged to work with a group of people who are so dedicated about improving care for people using services, and I think many of our teams, particularly our inspectors, have very difficult jobs and they go about them with huge dignity and professionalism, and are hugely patient-centred at all times, and so just a big thank you from me, and good luck with all of your future work. 2 things. The first thing I just wanted to mention was about the Fuller review. As you might have seen in the report, we have seen Claire Fuller's report, which sets out a lovely vision for the future of primary care. I think over the last few years we've seen I've been increasingly concerned about general practice, particularly since I've been in this role. We have a workforce that has recruitment problems, that is struggling with enormous demand, and that has just got more and more difficult during the pandemic. And I think the workforce in primary care is tired, it's exhausted, and in some places really struggling to manage those demands. And at the same time, we've also had increasing give feedback on care and increasing patient feedback that says they're not getting access and they're not getting the care that sometimes they expect. And I think that points to the fact that the current model of primary care and the current model of general practice is not sustainable, and we need to look at how we can develop new models of care in light of the wider integrated care system and all of the services. And so I think it's going to be primary care is fundamental to the future of the NHS. It's fundamental to be thriving. It's fundamental for patient care, and I think we need to ensure that all people work with primary care to ensure that we have a thriving and and good service for patients that is sustainable for people working in the services. So can really welcome Claire Fuller's report and very much keen to support it as we go forward. And can I just also take this opportunity to thank all my colleagues who are working incredibly hard in all primary care settings and dealing with very, very challenging situations at the moment. So thank you for all you're doing. Just a few things to mention about oral health as well. One is that oral health in care homes, the board may remember, just over 3 years ago we published a report looking at oral health in care homes. That hasn't gone off our agenda. At the time we found some fairly shocking things about the lack of oral health in care homes. It's so important for people's dignity, people's well-being, people's health to have good oral healthcare, and we are reviewing the progress that we made since that report was published 3 years ago, and the findings of that will come back to the board. A couple of minor things just to mention. One is that we, as you know, well, they're not minor, they're very important, but brief things. We've had long-standing problems about access to dental care. Just to flag, the NHS announced yesterday new reforms to the dental contract to improve access to dental care, and I think we welcome anything that's going to improve access to care for people's dental health. And also, just to flag also, we will be responding to the General Dental Council consultation that's just been launched about their new strategy. We work very closely with the General Dental Council and other dental stakeholders, and continuing to work with them, so we will be responding to that in due course.
Tyson?
I think it's me next. I'll be very brief. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give a couple of updates on my written report. In my written report, I say there were 870 inspections in June. We've now further validated much of the data, and the figure's now standing at 924, which is closer to May's figure. There's still 42 inspections to be validated, so I'm hoping that the final reckoning will be closer to 950. And very briefly on registration, things remain stable despite vacancies in the team, and the overall amount of work in the system is pretty much the same in June as it was in May. One thing we have been focusing on is the very old cases, the very old applications in the system. As of March this year, the oldest application was November 2020. As of in my written report, I talked about the oldest application being April 2021. I'm really pleased that today the latest figure is the oldest case in the system is January 2022. So we brought the tail into almost within 6 months, and I think that's a sign of good health in the system. That's all I wanted to update on.
Kate, do you want to add to your written report?
I can just very briefly flag to board that we are doing some active engagement with health and social care providers about our up-and-coming role around assuring local authorities and systems, and that our 2 pilots for local authorities are underway and are going well, and we are about to start our piloting with ICSs. Thank you.
So very brief. Right. I thought it'd be easier to take all the reports together, but questions from colleagues on any of the areas. Mark, you were going to go first, I think.
Thanks, Chairman. And firstly, I'd like to say it's, you really get a sense as a non-exec director here of the work that goes on a month-to-month basis. So thanks very much to the exec team for these reports. Sean, I was just wondering, in the ambulance sector, I was reading somewhere that there's a perception, perhaps, that people feel they get treated quicker at A&E if they arrive in an ambulance than if they don't. Is there a strategy to try to address that perception, to take pressure off the ambulance service?
I'm not aware of any figures myself that indicate that patients do get managed more quickly if they arrive by ambulance than if they arrive themselves. I think it's, patient disposition at ED will be a function of triage processes and their clinical need. I would have thought that that would be the thing that we would want to make sure was always present and preserved in emergency department function, that patients are managed and seen on the basis of clinical need rather than any conveyancing.
I totally agree with you. I was just saying that I've read this perception is out there, and that's what's putting the pressure onto the service. And so if you could dissipate that idea in people's minds that you get treated, walk-ins get treated as quickly as ambulance arrivals, might take some pressure off the system. Could I ask another question, please, Chairman? And it's to Tyson. Tyson, thanks a lot for your report. Just looking at the DMA performance in June, being down on May, I think you said to us before that you were using the bank to try to give more resource to the DMA. Is that still part of the process, or has that actually stopped now?
We're still using a number of bank inspectors in the DMA team. I think the DMA team is currently about 59 strong, and there are 17 FTE who are bank inspectors. We've lost a number of bank inspectors since the team started in February. I think it's 12 bank inspectors, FTE equivalents, and seven of our colleagues. So the size of the DMA team is smaller than it was. We're not looking to recruit new inspectors at the moment, given the pressures on the other inspection teams. But I think the main reason for the figures of DMAs being lower in June than May is because of the vacancies that have come about. And the bank inspectors that who have left for a number of reasons. We are using across the operation. We are using bank inspectors more generally. We still have around 160 on the books, and over the last month or so, we have been using them to fill other vacancies we've got, and that we're also looking to recruit to.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen.
Thanks, Ian. Two questions, if I could. One to Rosie. Very interesting comments to us, particularly about the current challenges in the whole primary care system and the need for a new model of primary care. Feels like quite a big issue. What's your advice to us on, so how would we or others working together, how do we generate such a thing? How do we get to that new model of care if you're, with all of your expertise and experience, you're saying what we've got isn't working, we need something different?
It's a good question. And I think the first thing to say is I don't think there's one model that fits all. I think it will depend on the population needs. It depends on the environments that people are working in and the local setups. I think the system has become very fragmented, and I think we need to encourage with our ICS regulation how systems are working together. I think primary care is dependent on how systems and providers around it work as well. So we need to see much more integration with primary care and community care. We need to see much more integration between the acute trusts. We need to really hold on to the things that we know are important in primary care, like continuity of care. Huge amount of evidence that continuity of care improves outcomes for people using services, and particularly people with complex needs. So we need to look at the important things in primary care and the things that we know are fundamental to good patient outcomes, but then think about how do we design services so they really support sustainability, deal with the workforce challenges that we're seeing across primary care, which are significant, and really think about what's going to deliver best outcomes for people using services. So I think I don't think there's a specific model. I think that different places are trying lots of different ideas. We've got vertical integration with acute trusts. We've got some great examples of where practices are working together with their local communities and providing good care. And I think there are pockets of really exciting things happening. I think the question is, how do we support those? How do we share that best practice? I think we have a role with that. How do we make sure our regulation is enabling so that we encourage that innovation and we encourage those new ways of working? And how do we how do we work with national stakeholders as well to make sure that we help systems nudge in the right direction, I guess. So I think there's lots of things we can do, and we have been doing, working with other partners in this area. But I think that there's no doubt that I don't think people using services or people working in primary care, doesn't seem to be working in a lot of places. I'm sure there's some places that it is working, but in a lot of places there's huge strains, and that makes me think it's not down to the people, despite what there's been a lot of negative media about primary care, which I think has been very difficult for people working in services to deal with, and it's been quite demoralising for them. And I don't think it's I think it's not because people aren't working hard. People are working extremely hard at the moment, and I've been out to lots of practices and seen the pressures that they're under, working extremely hard. So I don't think it's due to anyone's lack of dedication or commitment. I think it's more that the environments, the way they're having to work and the challenges they're having to face need new ways of thinking about them.
Stephen? So, that's your question?
It does. I don't know if you agree, Chair. I feel Rose has laid down quite a challenge for us, and we might want to sort of think, well, how would we come back to that one? Could I ask a second question?
Go ahead.
Which is, this is, sorry, my iPad's just gone to sleep again. Which is page 64 of the pack. It's the bit about adult social care funding reform, and I was really interested. The second paragraph seems to be signalling an issue that potentially section 18 brackets 3 might change the way the market works. And if I'm understanding it, I think it's because if people are given the, if self-funders are given the right to pay no more than the local authority pays, does that change the business model for private care homes dependent on self-funding, and how big a risk is that to our sort of market oversight and market shaping?
Shall I come in on that? So we need to watch this really closely. Yeah. So the guidance that was published about a week or two ago from the government was how they intend to operationalise this part of the Care Act. And what this means is, as you say, Stephen, if you are a self-funder, this gives you the opportunity to go to your local authority and to have your needs assessed and potentially get access to equivalent costs to what that local authority might be paying for a placement. So big implications. What was important about the operational guidance that came out last week was how the government intends to introduce this in this kind of staggered approach, that from October of next year, new people coming in to move into a residential service have the opportunity to apply for this, and then up to April 25, where people who have been living in residential care for a longer period of time could also apply to local councils. This will have an impact on the sector, and as you say, through our role in market oversight, where our laser focus is on about ensuring continuity of care for people, we need to observe very closely the impact that this has. However, the approach of kind of staggering its introduction should go some way to mitigating the impact on the market, rather than it all going live on the same date for everyone who's currently resident in residential nursing homes and all new applicants for it as well.
So watch the space, Steve. On your previous observation, I mean, I take the point Rosie's put down, the challenge. I mean, stating the obvious for the, particularly the benefit of the public. I mean, we're not responsible for the quality of care that's provided. We're not a provider, but we do have an overarching obligation to see if we can conduct our affairs in a way that encourages improvement. So I think, but in that context, the question is very fairly left out there. Any other questions for the management team from anybody? I mean, the feature, benefit or disadvantage when I do it again last is that usually your questions are asked by others, so I had two. One's already been asked. Actually, this is a request rather than a question, and it's probably for you, Kate, unless Rosie wants to pick it up. But under ICS, you did mention that the questions we're dealing with indicate misunderstandings about our role, and the example you gave was enforcement powers don't apply to systems and local authorities. I agree from meetings I've had as I'm inducting myself in the organisations, it is a common misunderstanding. So given the fact this is a public meeting, I don't know if you can just say a few more words about that.
Yeah, happy to. And this is feedback that's come from our meetings with health and social care providers, so supporting them to understand what our role will be around local authority assurance and integrated care systems. So this is very much about providing transparency, opportunities for local authorities and integrated care systems to improve, and the ability, Rosie was talking earlier about how there will be excellent examples around the country of where health and social care providers are doing really innovative work together. This is the opportunity for us as the independent regulator to spotlight that, to encourage that improvement elsewhere. So the purpose of this is around transparency, driving improvement, and supporting ICSs to deliver the ambition I think we all have for them, which is that they tackle inequalities in their area, they drive improvement, and they support people to get better outcomes. Do you want to come in on anything else, Rosie?
Yeah, just to say we won't have enforcement powers in ICSs. We will continue to have the enforcement powers with providers, and I think that there needs to be a very fluid relationship between the ICS work and the provider work, so that there's a two-way process. And certainly, you know, if providers are not taking part in their local ICS work, I think that's something we will need to very much look at with the provider regulation that we do. There will be routes of escalation, though, if we are aware of concerns that emerge through the ICS work, and we will be working with partners like NHS England, like the LGA and others. Just if there are concerns being raised, we need to make sure that those are addressed, and ultimately if we're not confident, and in a last case scenario we will have a route of escalation through to the Secretary of State if we're not confident that concerns are being addressed and improvements are happening.
Thanks, Rosie. I mean, I think the last point is really important by way of reassurance. I mean, I have to say I find it difficult to see how we would design enforcement powers for local authorities or ICSs, but as I say, it's something that's come up in some of my discussions, and if you're finding it come back, it probably suggests we just need to make sure that we are proactively communicating what we are doing, but the limits of what we're doing, so that we can try to head misunderstandings off. Any other questions of people? If not, well, I'll thank the executive team or members of the executive team for their response. So thank you very much indeed for that. We have a few final matters on the agenda, most of which are by way of formalities to approve. The first is the minutes of the previous meeting. They're enclosed in the pack. Can I take those as agreed, or any comments? Everybody's nodding, so those are approved. There is an action log, which I temporarily can't find. There was only one item on it, which was something that's on track, and we'll pick it up in September. So unless anybody wishes to comment or add, I think that's correct and sole standing. I think the final item on the agenda before we go to AOB is a report from Sally on the conduct of the Audit and Corporate Governance Committee. So, Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Ian. There is a report in the pack, so I won't go through all of it. But I've got really bad feedback. That better? Good. Yes, thank you. So this is our Audit and Corporate Governance Committee's annual assurance report to the board. It's the 11th one. Several of our non-exec colleagues serve on that committee, along with 2 independent members from outside. So I'd like to say thanks to them for being so diligent and committed during the year before we start. We also have regular attendance from our executive colleagues to be able to both explain improvements they've made and respond to the audit reports that we have. I'm pleased to say that in terms of the annual report and accounts, there are no key issues to report at the moment, and we are expecting a clean report, although a slight delay to laying that report because of the work that the National Audit Office need to do around local government pension schemes. So that's probably autumn. In terms of internal audit, we have a positive opinion from PwC, our head of internal audit. They have given us a rating of moderate, same as last year. It sounds underwhelming, but moderate actually means generally satisfactory with some improvements to be made, as is inevitable in an organisation that's as complex as ours. They produced 13 reports during the year, of which only one was high risk, around consistency of our regulation, which we know is the key point of our transformation programme. And management have responded, and as the transformation programme delivers, then we'll be able to improve that consistency. We have a number of agreed actions. Just to give you a flavour of the type of work we do, we obviously oversee the risk register, strategic and high-level operational, and we've overseen quite a few changes to that risk profile that CQC has this year. We know it's been a challenging year, but that is very live and current. We've also done a number of deep dives into different topics, and we focus very much on assurance around CQC's transformation programme. We did have a subcommittee which looked very closely at transformation business cases and delivery of our overall portfolio. And the place that we've got to now is, as we are implementing our new structure, our new ways of working, transformation reporting in future will come to the board directly, and we've decided to close that subcommittee. We focused also on cyber security and IT disaster recovery. There is quite a large and specific programme in place to ensure we have as few cybersecurity incidents as possible, and that work is progressing well. In terms of counter-fraud, we only have very few cases that are investigated, and none of those have led to further action. It's important to say that we also oversee risk for the National Guardian's Office and Healthwatch England, and we were delighted to have two really in-depth and impressive presentations from the leaders of those organisations, not about their overall governance, but about their risk and financial management. There are some funding issues around Healthwatch England in particular, but we have confidence in the people leading those organisations. We've played our own part in the board effectiveness review. The feedback for ACGC was largely positive, and we have a few minor things to improve around additional assurance. I think in conclusion, unless people have got questions, ACGC are assured by the governance and risk management and audit processes that we have in place, and content that that assurance is reliable and comprehensive for the purposes of the board. So it's a positive report. And again, I'd just like to say thank you to all of our colleagues, non-exec and exec, for the work they put in, particularly in providing that assurance. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Sally. Very comprehensive, and I emphasise the importance of the report. A huge number of our key responsibilities of the board are delegated to that committee, so it's important to all of us that its affairs conducted well. Has anybody got any questions for Sally on her report? Mark?
Well, not a question, Chairman, but as a member of the committee, I would really like to thank Sally for her hard work and leadership and producing such a strong report as this. And I'd also like to thank the exec team, especially Kirsty and Chris, for their engagement with the ACGC governance process. Thank you.
Well, thanks. We'll continue on that theme. I was just also going to add thanks to those members of the subcommittee, specifically. Sally mentioned that it has been closed for the benefit of the public. It's not that we're spending less time monitoring what's going on, but the world's moved on, the project's up and running. It's a long way down the track, and the things that are outstanding as we transition to business as usual, I think, are matters for the full board. But I know a huge amount of work went into that subcommittee. There are some figures on meeting attendance here, but they don't do justice to the amount of work that individual NEDs, I know, did outside the meeting. So we've reported to this committee at a very high level progress on really quite a major transformation programme. So my thanks to everybody there. A lot of this predates me, but even so, I do see the huge work that was put in. Any other questions for Sally on her report? In that case, that's the end of the items on the agenda. I should ask colleagues if they have any other business they wish to raise.
Yes, please. Yes,
Huh?
please.
Sorry?
Yes, please.
Are you going to pick up the reporting?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're going to squabble over who's going to say this. You go in.
Okay. I hope board members can join me in thanking both Kirsty and Rosie for their fantastic contributions over a number of years. I think in Rosie we've had a fantastic chief inspector who's been able to support the board, but more importantly support the sector through what's argued been one of the most trying times in our history as a nation, actually. And Rosie being able to build relationships and improve relationships despite that complexity across some pretty complex sectors in general practice, in dentistry, and with the military, with prisons, all of which it will of course have been particularly stretched. So an enormous thank you from all of us. And Rosie's also been a real staunch advocate for integrated care work, and I think we've talked a number of times in our meetings recently around the work that we are aspiring to do around integrated care systems. And I think Rosie's leadership and advocacy all the way through her tenure here has been fantastic. So I think I really would want to thank Rosie for that work. And in Kirsty, we've got somebody who has been really the architect of our transformation work and has talked many times around this table around the work we've done on change, and that's been fantastic, and that will enable us. It's given us the vehicle, I think, to transform as an organisation. But what we don't talk about very much, of course, is Kirsty running a large piece of our organisation. We've got some really effective support services that quietly behind the scenes do their thing, and we've seen some examples of that in this meeting alone in terms of things like the people plan, and that's been incredibly powerful, and it gives us the basis for doing the work that we want to do in future. So an enormous thank you to both Rosie and to Kirsty on behalf of all of us for the fantastic work they've done. Thank you. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. Look, I don't want to repeat that. You've known both much longer than I have. I've only been here 3.5 months, but much of that reflects their executive experience. But, I mean, you've also been members of the board in my limited period here. So even in a very short time, enjoyed working with you. What I think is always sad to see colleagues go, but also I think is a testament to an organisation when people go on to very significance elsewhere in the sector. And I guess particularly with you, Rosie, we look forward to continuing a close working relationship. So I'll add my congratulations, but thank you for the longer version, Ian. That's good. So that concludes it does conclude. It closes the main business of the meeting. Now, as you know, we do ask members of the public if they would like to submit questions, and we say that after the conclusion of the meeting we'll address them. And we do have a couple from Robin Pike, so I'm going to take the first, and T'other Ian is going to take the other. Robin's first question was, how can, I'm using his words, how can CQC adapt its business for public board meetings to include a patient story as it did in June? And I guess that reference to a very emotional presentation from Alexis Quinn. Robin, I think that let me answer that in two parts. I mean, the public board meeting, we believe, serves two purposes. It does allow public account for CQC's performance as an organisation, and it also shows some of the processes we go through for things to be approved. It also gives us an ability to listen, debate and respond to challenges in the wider and healthcare environment, and there are aspects of that like horizon scanning. For the latter, a important component part of that, I think, is the voices and lived experience of people who use services, which, I mean, ultimately is what we're here to serve. and also of frontline staff in the health and care systems. So I think doing that helps the board focus on the right issues, and we do keep our focus therefore on the public at large, and rather than simply care providers, important as they are. So, we do aim to listen and act on the voices of people in that way, in a number of ways, and invitation of the board is one of them. But bearing in mind that is the agenda of the board, I think there is also a limit to the amount of time we can spend simply on patient stories. And you will appreciate that there are many other ways in which we do listen to patient stories, both the organisation as a whole, at the executive level, but opportunities for non-executives to attend. So I can assure you that from the point of view of the non-executives and the way they conduct their business, and particularly the executives, that we do try to make sure that we keep an eye on and listen to the patient stories. But you're absolutely right that the public board maintains a role as well, so you make a good point. Clearly Alexa struck a chord with a lot of people, and it is something that we will continue to keep under review. Ian.
Thanks, Ian. And the second question from Robin was, how effectively does CQC find the providers of NHS and social care are adapting their care to accommodate the current heatwave? So again, I think it's a very pertinent and very current question. We speak on the Wednesday of the week, when the Monday and the Tuesday are the two hottest days of the year and arguably ever. And so I think it's too early at this point to make a definitive judgment in terms of an evidence-based judgment. But I think it would be worth just sharing a few of the things that we are doing to look at the way that providers are responding. We use information from providers to ensure that systems and processes are in place to ensure that the risks associated with the current heatwave are mitigated. Through our inspection of the well-led domain in particular, we review contingency plans to ensure that risks are mitigated. We'll work with other stakeholders, such as NHS England, who provide direction and support for the NHS. And through this, we're aware that NHS England have asked trusts to ensure that patients who have completed their medical journey to be moved out of the emergency department to an observation area or a ward before admission to their ward bed. And this is obviously to help create capacity within emergency departments and thereby facilitate the more timely offloading of ambulances before a patient's become exposed to the risks associated with a prolonged stay in vehicles not really designed to protect them from extreme heat. We do expect care providers to have contingency plans more broadly for adverse weather events of all sorts. And if we receive information that suggests that the provider is not taking reasonable steps to reduce the impact of the heatwave on people who access their service, we would treat this in the same way as any other information of concern and use it to determine our regulatory response accordingly. The government has provided guidance to health and social care staff around the support for vulnerable people during the heatwave, and when speaking with providers, we'll continue to signpost them to this guidance. However, we will continue to inspect and monitor plans in place where we believe that there's a significant risk. And we ensure that we share guidance with providers. And on the 14th of July, we shared the UK Health Security Agency Heatwave Plan for England and other guidance, including support for health and care professionals and supporting people living in care homes. So I hope you'll agree, Robin, we've been reasonably proactive in terms of sharing the guidance that's out there. But of course, as I say, a bit too early to tell in terms of exactly how the last couple of days have gone. But of course, we will keep that under review over time. Thanks, Ian.
Sorry, I haven't got the mic on. The formal business finished. We've answered the questions from the public. So on that, I'll close the broadcast. Thank you very much, everybody.